because I told some kids I would, so I'm recording. Period 1, has anyone already committed those dates to memory? Because you only need to know the beginning and ending dates.
I believe it's 1200 to 1400 or 1450.
It's 1200 to 1450. You're real close there, Stellan, so that's good. Awesome. 1200 to 1450. So approximately 800 years ago to 550 years ago. Okay? So all the major religions that we have discussed and philosophies are in existence and have been in existence for a while. The newest one is Islam, and when we start 1200, Islam's already been around for 600 years, and it's the newest one. So all of these traditions have been around. Now I want to start with China with some background info. We discussed earlier something called the Middle Kingdom. This traditional Chinese belief that China is the greatest civilization on the earth, that they are the only cultured people, the center of trade, culture, etc. So generally what that means is the Chinese government and many of its citizens do not like or want to associate with foreigners, people with different backgrounds, different beliefs. Okay, and that is old even already by period 1. That's a belief that's already probably 3,000 years old by the time we start this class, technically. So it's a long time. I want to mention 2 other things very briefly, okay, that I haven't mentioned before, but both have been in they will be in this reading, so I'll just reference them. Again, I apologize for my terrible handwriting. The mandate of heaven, that's supposed to be an A there, H-E-A-V-E-N. This is the belief that many cultures have, that they're divine beings, they're God or gods, in this case in China, gods, that the emperor has the throne because the gods have allowed it. You have divine support for your rule. Now, you can point to events in your society to justify this, because people would say, well, how do you know the gods support you? What might be going well that an emperor could point to and say, see, the gods support me? Any ideas? Anything you can think of that might be happening in a society that you could point to? What?
Agriculture.
Well, what about agriculture?
Fertile soil and abundant crops.
You're gonna have a lot of food. You're going to have a lot of food, yes. There won't be a big problem with famine or starvation, correct. If we fight a war, what's going to happen? Okay?
Win.
We're going to win. We're going to get that dub. Absolutely. Yes. We won't have any major natural disasters, no floods, no earthquakes, that kind of thing. Because could they explain 800 years ago why we had earthquakes? No. So what's the best explanation? The gods are mad at the king. Okay? Now here's what makes this interesting, because almost every society we will study before the modern era had that kind of belief, that you had divine support for your ruler. What makes this one different, the Chinese also believed you could lose that support. This was not till you die. If you do something that angers the gods, you might lose the mandate of heaven. Now, therefore, what might happen for me to think that I've lost the mandate of heaven?
Natural disasters?
Earthquakes, floods, absolutely. If we fight a war, what's going to happen?
You lose.
You lose, yes. What might happen to our food supply?
There might be
just gone.
Depleted.
Not enough, famine. Some of y'all are talking over each other. It's all good. Don't worry about it. I appreciate you willing to jump in. So yeah, I heard like 5 answers, but they're all right. Famine, poverty, etc. Yes. So in theory, what should happen is that the ruler will realize they have lost the mandate and they will resign. They will quit and step down because they realize they're harming their people. And this actually happened on a few occasions in Chinese history where life is not going well and the ruler says, well, it must be my fault, the gods are angry, and they quit. Now think how hard it would be to give up that much power. But it did happen. But most of the time it doesn't. But what it does do when things are bad is encourage someone else to maybe challenge for the throne. Clearly you've lost the mandate of heaven, so I should go after you. Now, sometimes these excuses are flimsy. Boy, it's been cloudy 3 days in a row. I guess the mandate of heaven's gone. Let's go after him. But usually it's like a long period of strife or war or famine or something like that. And so again, China has dynasties, as we talked about earlier. A dynasty just means a single family rule. When the father dies, the throne goes to his son or his nephew or his grandson or whomever, and that happens for generations. So like in your textbook, it talks, and your study guide, it says S-O-N-G. Looks like song to us, it's pronounced sung. If you mispronounce it, I don't care. This is not a speaking class, so it's fine. Sung China refers to a dynasty. That is a family of rulers. And so when we start in 1200 CE, China is ruled by the Sung family and will be for the first 80 or so years of this time period. Now, do you need to memorize that? No. But if you see Sung China and you're like, why are they singing? No, 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 no. That refers to the family in charge. Okay? And we'll come back to that in a minute. And your third and final big picture overview about China that we come into this time period with. So I want to be clear. There are 3 types of essays you will have to write. Compare and contrast, cause effect, change continuity. To have continuity means to stay the same. Continuity is often tougher because change is easy to see. If the next time you saw me on one of these screens I had a purple mohawk, all of you would probably notice that. I don't know where I'd get the hair from, but you'd notice it. If I am exactly the same tomorrow in second period, for those of you in my second period, as I am today, it's just another day with Mr. Rich. Okay? So continuity is sometimes hard to see. You're looking for things that are the same the entirety of the time period. So these 2 ideas are continuous throughout modern Chinese history. Continuous. Okay? All right? Now, side note, I'm getting a lot of dings from my email. I'm betting I have people who are having trouble getting on and want me to help them. Am I going to stop class and help people after 2 o'clock? Nope. If you're having internet issues, if you're having problems getting on, if you're having problems with, you need to do that. You need to try earlier and let me know and I can help you. I cannot help you when I stop class. I am not stopping class to help 3 people get on the internet. I'm not. If you want my help, ask for it in advance. It's like, I ask you what you want for your birthday meal and you tell me and I go to the store and then the stove's on and I'm cooking and you go, I changed my mind. I already went to the store and I've started the stove. Like, I'm not going to change the meal now. So just, those are things to be mindful of. Now, it could just be I'm very popular and I just got 7 emails in 20 seconds for some other reason, but I bet that's what it is. And so just be mindful of that. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So the third example we have of something that is continuous throughout Chinese history is called the civil service exam. The adjective civil refers to government. So civil rights, who grants civil rights? The government does through laws. All right. Now today, if we talk about working for the government, that is often seen as not a glamorous job. You're not going to make a lot of money. So if you're a lawyer, would you rather work for a private firm or work for the government? You're definitely going to make a lot more money working for a private firm. If you are a public defender for the county attorney's office, you are very likely going to make much less money than someone working at a private law firm. However, in ancient China,
Oh, sorry, my mic is broken.
I understand that, but you need to like stop jumping in then. The best jobs are for the government. You got prestige, you got social clout, you got money. So you wanted to work for the government. However, China doesn't want a bunch of bums working.
Yo, can you stop unmuting me?
I'm not, I'm muting you. Okay? So I'm getting ready to kick you out. So stop chiming in. Thank you. The civil service exam is a test to try to pass to get a government job. And these government jobs are hard to come by, and you got paid a lot of money or more money than you would in other positions, and you would have a lot of prestige, a lot of honor. People would be proud of you and your family. So you wanted to work for the government. So this test is about 2,000 years old. The Chinese started giving it in the couple centuries before the modern 2000 era. So about 2,200 years ago, they started having this test. It's a 3-day test. Less than 10% of people pass it. And if you pass it, you get to be a government employee. You might be a tax collector. You might be a scribe. You might be, like architects. There's all kinds of things. If you pass this, your title was a Mandarin. Now, you might be thinking the orange, but actually the most common dialect of the Chinese language is called Mandarin Chinese. Guess who created the written version of that dialect? These government workers who passed this test. Okay? So when you come back to school in person and get to be in my classroom, I have a lot of posters, I have a lot of decorations. Right next to my clock, there is a small poster of a Chinese Mandarin, a Chinese government official whose purpose is to try to keep us on track and keep me organized in filing time. Okay? And so it's difficult because Mr. Rich kind of rambles on occasion. So, but that is their job. So a Mandarin is a high-level government worker. And here is what you need to know about this. Throughout Chinese history, whenever our dynasties are doing well, whenever it is a good time for China, the tests are hard, the tests are secure, people aren't cheating or bribing their way to pass it. Because if you study really hard and then get a great job, you're probably going to be a great employee. And then the government will be in good hands with competent, intelligent people. When people bribe their way into it, or my uncle knows somebody and he's going to let me pass the test even though I'm not good enough and I didn't study, you're going to start having a bunch of bums work for the government, and then the quality of the Chinese government goes down. Often that leads to a dynastic overthrow. One of the things that will often cause one dynasty to fall and another one to rise is we start cheating on the civil service exam. So the word that it describes this, it's called a meritocracy. If you earn something on merit, it's because you worked hard and got it from your own. You didn't have your mom or anybody else try to help you out. Okay? Just you. Does that make sense? Okay? And I'd like to remind my students that my expectation is your names are first and last name on your identification plates. If you are not showing a first and last name, I'm going to remove you from the group. Okay?
I can't read what it is you just wrote.
I wrote meritocracy. So MERITO, that is CR. That is an R. I apologize. It's a
Meritocracy.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I don't know who that Richard cat was, but he's not one of ours, so he's gone. So, again, anybody else, if you have not put your first and last name on here, I'm going to kick you out because I ain't got time for stupid. I ain't got time for weirdos jumping in here because they got nothing better to do. Okay? Last call. If you're not first and last name. All right, that one's gone too. All right? Guys, I don't know if anybody shared the link with your friends, but don't do that, please. Just don't. I don't have time for dumb. Because clearly those two did not belong in here. But they're gone now and they're never coming back. So anyway, meritocracy, you get your position because you earn it. Everybody clear on that? Okay, good. Now, let's talk specifically about some of the things that are happening. Your textbook, if you've not read it yet, I'm giving you a little bit of an advance notice, describes this as a golden age, a time of great cultural, political, economic, intellectual accomplishment. So China often is one of the world's greatest civilizations. They have a huge military. They have excellent trade goods that other people want. They have a large population. They have great cultural and political accomplishments. So Sung China is often seen as one of the great times in Chinese history. Okay? They have a lot of new inventions are created during the Sung Dynasty. I'll give you a couple of examples. Things that are invented in the Sung Dynasty. The concept of printing. Now, not the printing press. This was still done by hand, but the ability to put characters on letters, press them with ink, and then put them on paper, the Chinese create that. The printing press, which will come a couple hundred years later, is better, but it's an improvement on the original Chinese idea. Also, the compass.
What does that say? I can't read it.
What does what say?
The thing that begins with S.
Sung, S-O-N-G. That's the
Oh,
Chinese
okay.
dynasty.
What about the one after that?
China?
Oh. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. No worries. My handwriting is not the best. This stylus is not the easiest to write with either. So when we do get back together in person with a marker on a whiteboard, it will be a little easier, I promise. But this is, I apologize. But no, you're good. No worries. I do not get upset when you ask me to explain things that I wrote because my handwriting is generally bad. You're correct. I can't have it all, kids. All right, let's be honest. So the compass. What does a compass do?
Tell directions.
Yeah, helps us to explore long distances. Now, that will be improved a couple hundred years from now. But the idea of a compass using the Earth's magnetic field to help us explore and find where we're going is a Chinese invention. And then this one may be the most important of all, or maybe not important, but impactful, and that is gunpowder. The Chinese invent gunpowder. Now, you could argue that's not a positive thing in the world, but it definitely is very impactful. Because by the end of period 1 and definitely into period 2, if you can use gunpowder in your military and you're fighting those that do not, you're going to win. It's going to become almost impossible for those without the capacity to make weapons using gunpowder by the end of period 1 to keep being successful militarily. You just kind of got to have it. Now, oddly enough, when the Chinese first create gunpowder, they use it for a different purpose than war. They use it for fireworks. It's the same kind of thing. If you've ever exploded some bottle rockets a little too close to yourself, you may have had a slight burn. That comes because it's not gunpowder anymore, but excuse me, that traditionally is what is used in fireworks, which the Chinese are kind of the masters of that concept back in the day. Okay, so one other thing they invent, and then we'll move on to some other places. They invent in time period 1 the concept, what's called flying money. Flying money, which we would call credit. They invent the concept of banking and credit. Now, this is not for the average person. This is not for the poor farmer. This is for a merchant who has to travel great distances. They don't need to take all their money with them, which means they might be a target for getting robbed. Okay? They can put something in a bank. They can travel a couple hundred miles away. They can get that money out. They can use it. They can buy things on credit and pay people later. This allows for some of us who maybe don't have enough money to start a business to start businesses by borrowing money. And that's pretty much what banks do today. So they create the concept of credit and, in a sense, create modern banking, which is kind of a huge part of the world today, correct? It is. Most of us do not have the money to buy our first car, house, pay for college, all that kind of stuff. And so we borrow, we have credit, we take out a loan. And that concept, you could argue, was created by the Chinese about 850, 900 years ago. Okay? So those are some pretty significant inventions, creations, etc. So we're not going to get into a ton of detail, but let's just say the Chinese have a massively significant, important, creative, powerful, wealthy society. If we were comparing the societies of period 1, there's really only 2 that I think could be in the argument for the most powerful, and definitely one of them is the Chinese. The other would be the Middle Eastern societies of the Muslim Empire, so we'll talk more about them next week. But those are the 2, basically, you would argue would be the top of the world. Okay? Now, let's move over across a small body of water and go to Japan very briefly. Let's talk about Japan. Oh, no. I just realized I forgot something I needed to discuss. Dadgummit, I'm so sorry. One more thing on China. I'm getting old, so forgive me. This was in our study guide yesterday, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. The concept of Neo-Confucianism. That is N-E-O. Good Lord, I realize it does not look like an E. My apologies. N-E-O, Confucianism. Anybody know what Neo means?
New.
No.
So it's a new version of Confucianism. Well, what does that mean? Let's go over it very briefly. And again, if you have your study guide, this is one of the examples and those illustrative examples from yesterday. So we know Confucianism, we just reviewed it the other day, is respect for elders, follow the rules, do what you're told. They use an analogy that the emperor is like your father. So you should respect the emperor and do what he says. Listen to your grandparents, listen to your parents. They always know what's better, your older siblings, your teachers, public figures, etc. Well, before we start time period 1, there's a couple 100-year stretch that we won't get into because it's before our class. But basically, there is no singular Chinese dynasty. One of the great dynasties was defeated, and instead of having another dynasty take over, we just kind of crumbled apart for a while. Now, China still exists. Chinese people still live and breathe and, eat and all those kind of things. But we do not have a singular Chinese dynasty that we would study in a class like this. So what happens during that time period is that Buddhism had become very popular. Buddhism enters China. We will talk later in this unit about how religion spreads. So we'll get to that. But for right now, just know that Buddhism enters China and becomes a very popular religion because Buddhism does things that Confucianism doesn't. Buddhism talks about your soul. Buddhism talks about an afterlife. Those are things Confucianism doesn't talk about. So Buddhism becomes followed by millions of Chinese people. And then, I'm skipping a lot of years here, a Chinese dynasty returns and we go back to an emperor, one single ruler who controls all of China. The emperors don't like Buddhism. Well, Mr. Rich, Buddhists are chill. True. But Buddhism says every person has a middle path. Your individual path to enlightenment. That means you have a choice. Why don't ancient emperors like you having choices in anything?
They want to control you.
Perfect. Yes, Lauren. So if you have a choice in your religion, guess what you might want a choice? What else might you want a choice with?
Your government.
Yeah, who's the boss? And so no choices for you. But here's the problem, and you all know this because you're teenagers, you're rebellious. If I ban something, what is many of our initial reaction to that?
To want
You
to do
want to do it even
You
more.
want to do it.
They
Yeah,
want it back.
absolutely. Absolutely. In the 80s, with music, when we still bought physical albums in stores, and I know some of you may do that, but that was the only way you could get music. There was no digital services. A very well-meaning group of people decided they wanted to warn parents because some of their kids were listening to stuff that wasn't appropriate, had violent imagery or cursing or sexual imagery or whatever. So they decided to put a sticker on your album in the store that said parental advisory, explicit lyrics. You've probably seen this. Except now it's not a sticker on an album, it's in the corner of on Spotify or something, right? Or there's a little E next to it. The thought was we're going to let parents know that their kids shouldn't be listening to this. This is bad stuff. They're too young for it. Of course, what did these stickers make every teenager want to do with these particular pieces of music?
Buy them?
Buy them. That's all the naughty stuff. That's all the stuff I shouldn't be listening to, so I want to listen to it. So the sales for a lot of these albums, way up. That was not the intended choice of these people, but it happened. So long story short, the emperors don't like Buddhism because it offers choices. And that's scary to us because what if they decide they don't want me to be the emperor? Ugh. But we don't want to ban Buddhism because it'll inspire more people to be Buddhist. So what we decided to do is create an alternative. And that alternative is Neo-Confucianism. Okay? It's good old-fashioned Confucianism with a couple parts of Buddhism thrown in that we don't find threatening. Buddhists like to meditate. People like meditating. It seems popular. Heck, today, some of you may meditate and do not consider yourself Buddhist. So it has become very popular across many cultures. So the emperor says, well, let's support meditation. Like, let's open up meditation centers and like pay the salaries of people that can teach meditation. Ooh, okay, good. Buddhists like nature. Nature is calming. Nature is peaceful. We already believe that if we're Taoists, so let's support that too. But let's cut out the stuff we don't like, namely the middle path. I don't want to hear about the afterlife. I don't want to hear about your soul, because all that goes back to the middle path and a choice you might make. And I don't want you making choices. So they make the official state religion Neo-Confucianism. So again, a mixture of traditional Confucian beliefs, order, respect authority, follow the rules, with some elements of Buddhism that give people some...
Did it work?
We'll get there. That's a good question, but give me like 30 seconds, I'll get there. And we're going to mix it with elements of Buddhism that are non-threatening to my power. So meditation, liking and loving nature, that's all good. But definitely no afterlife, no middle path. Does it work? Yeah, this becomes the official state religion. And for hundreds of years, this is the most common religious belief in China. even though it kind of takes out the religious part. And then eventually, a couple hundred years later, we get rid of Buddhism. But almost nobody's just a Buddhist anymore. They've all become Neo-Confucian. Why? Because any temples that are built, but with government money, your tax dollars basically, are going to be Neo-Confucian temples. And the Buddhists have a hard time raising money. And so eventually they're not going to exist, at least the way they did. Okay? Now, does that mean there's no Buddhists in China? Of course not. There still will be, but the vast majority of people will support Neo-Confucianism. Does that make sense? Okay? So it's government modifying belief systems to create something that they can support. And this is pretty common throughout history. If we all believe in the same religion and the gods appointed me, well, then clearly I'm the best person to rule. You shouldn't challenge me. All right? And then I know I said this was one thing I forgot. I realized I forgot a second thing. Oh my gosh, I have notes. I should look at them, but I didn't. I just thought of this. This is in your reading, and I'm not going to show you pictures because some of you might find it a little gross. But it's also interesting, as I mentioned, how great this time is in China, how powerful they are, how wealthy they are, how expanding their territory they are, technology, culture. But women, at this time of great cultural growth, we're going to see women's rights actually decrease. Things get worse for women. And that is due to a practice that is created during, we believe, the Sung Dynasty, called foot binding. And this will be in your textbook. And yes, your textbook has pictures. And if you want to Google them, you can, because there are still little old Chinese ladies alive today that had this done to them when they were little girls. Okay? We're not quite sure how this started. This is one of those, it's so old. One of the stories goes that one of the emperors liked women with small feet. He found that attractive. And China, like many other societies at this time period, incorporated what is called a harem for the emperor. The most important thing for the emperor is to produce offspring. You need children to take your place, usually men. Okay, boys. So if you only have one wife, gee, it's going to be hard to make sure you have a son. If you've got lots of women that are there to potentially give you children, makes it a little better. Or it sometimes was just for the pleasure of the emperor. So the Chinese had a harem, hundreds of young women that were there for one purpose. And that was to sleep with the emperor. Okay? But the best thing for you, if that was your position, if you became a mother of one of the emperor's kids, you got elevated in status. You got a private residence. You got servants. You got better food. You got nicer clothes. So if you were going to be one of his harem women, you wanted to be one that had a child. So you really wanted him to notice you and pick you. Well, supposedly, and again, this could all be a complete lie, we don't really know, is that this emperor liked women with small feet. The problem is some of us have bigger feet. So we don't take off our shoes. That'd be weird. So we're wearing shoes. So what we do is we literally start breaking the feet of adult women and then resetting the bones to make the feet smaller, more compact. Okay? So, if you're posting in the chat, I can't see it, so I'm not paying attention to that. But the point is this. If you break your arm, you wear a sling, you wear a cast. Because if your doctor sets your arm like this when you break it, and your wrist is like turned like this, what's going to happen when you take off your cast? It's going to be set like this. You'll be hitting people in the face with it for a long time. That's why you have to set your bones, because bones will grow back basically how you set them, with some exceptions. So you could break your feet. All right, I'm wearing a sandal today. Think of it like this. Like that. And then you wrap it, and then the bones will heal like that. Essentially cutting the size of your foot down by a third or potentially a half. Now, is this the real story? There's a lot of speculation. We'll probably never know the exact truth. But guys, if you have a cell phone, I have an iPhone 8. The average foot-bound foot is a little smaller than my phone in terms of length. So if you have your phone nearby, feel free to put it near your foot. And for most of us, that's going to be, our phone's going to be a lot smaller than our foot. And just think about the process of potentially breaking your bones to make that fit. Oh. And so we don't exactly know how, but it's like many other trends. What starts with the wealthy goes down socially, and eventually it's going to happen to all society. It's like your favorite actor, one of one of these Hollywood stars wears an outfit on a red carpet at an award show, and then there's the really nice version a couple weeks later that's not thousands of dollars, and then eventually you get the Target version you can buy in stores 6 months later that's under $100. Okay, so what we know is that basically by the end of the Sung Dynasty, if you were a young woman and you wanted to get married, and of course this is a time of great sexism, basically that was your job, was to get married, ladies. You needed to have small feet. Okay, so that's what you had to do. Regardless, if you wanted to get married, you had to have these footbands. So it starts being done to little girls, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 4-year-olds. My youngest niece is 8, and I love her to death. And I can't imagine sitting there and breaking her feet and setting them up in a way to potentially make her more attractive to a potential husband someday. But that was the culture. And this will last really until the 19th century. It starts to fade away then, and it's really only outlawed about 75 years ago. So that's why I said you might have little old Chinese ladies that had this done to them that are in their 80s. They had it done to them when they were 4 years old, 80 years ago. But there are some pictures in your textbook. So again, China, great, powerful civilization, many wonderful cultural accomplishments, but at the same time of a lot of this growth and power, we're seeing a decline in women's rights, in women's roles. And that's unfortunately a common theme we'll see in this class, is that women are going to be treated pretty poorly in almost every society for almost all of history. Okay? Now, as I mentioned like 10 minutes ago, let's move on to Japan. Now, Japan is going to copy a lot of things from China. Buddhism makes its way to Japan from China. Confucianism makes its way to Japan from China. If any of you are in the Japanese classes and study Japanese, you know the difference between the Japanese written language and the Chinese written language. I imagine 90% of us don't. They look very similar to the untrained eye. So there's a lot of the similarity in their written language, cultural customs, etc. All right? So a lot of Japanese culture will be borrowed from Chinese culture. This is true of other societies in Asia, like Vietnam, like Thailand, places that borrow a lot of Chinese culture, because China is by far the biggest, most powerful state in East Asia at this time. Okay, and it will be pretty much for all of its history. All right? Japan, of course, is a group of isolated islands, which means it's going to develop differently. It doesn't get nearly as much foreign trade, because to get to Japan at that point, you had to really, really make a lot of effort to get there. Japan is a society that is mostly going to be what we call feudal. Okay? Feudal. Okay, I don't know Abigail Jefferson, so Abigail Jefferson, goodbye. Okay?
The boys are back in town!
You too. Goodbye. Well, I'll have to change my password and all that good stuff, because some of y'all gave it to somebody. I don't know who did it, but don't do that, please. Do not give these things out to other people, because then we have to deal with this foolishness. All right, so as I was saying, feudalism is a word you may have heard of before. It is also going to be in Europe. We will talk about it when we get to Europe. Feudalism is hierarchy. Okay? Which means there's someone at the top, and it's like a ladder or a staircase. So in Japan, you have the emperor. You have a military ruler. You have landlords, usually that control the land. And then the vast majority of us are peasant farmers who work the land and are very, very poor. Remember, we tend to draw societies like pyramids. There's most of us at the bottom, very few of us at the top. Okay? Does that make sense? And it's a system where if you are born poor, you're going to die poor. There's really no way for you to change it. There's really no way for you to improve. There's really no way for you to get money, because you don't get paid a salary. You get to keep some of the food you farm, but a lot of that is going to be given to your landlord, and that is your rent money. That's how you pay to live on their land. So you're never saving anything. You're never acquiring anything of your own. So there's no way for you to gain up in the ladder. There's no way to move up. It's just not possible.
Is this kind of like the caste system?
Kind of like, but it's a little different in that it doesn't have the religious connection. It's not a part of a religion per se. It's just the societal structure. Okay, but yeah, Ethan, there's a lot of commonalities there. That's fair. And we will see this in Europe as well, even though at this point there is no known contact between the Japanese and many European societies. So it just developed relatively similarly, thousands of miles apart from each other at the same time, which is kind of interesting when you think about it.
Mr.
Okay.
Rich,
Yes.
did they have something like the service exam to like increase their status?
They did not, because in Japan, that's one of the differences. They do not adopt that philosophy. And to this day, I mean, America has this as well. Like if you go to an Ivy League school, you look at a lot of our most powerful politicians, many of them have that background or they've gone to, but like, you know, neither Trump nor Biden has attended an Ivy League school in terms of like a law degree or anything like that. So that's pretty unusual. Most of our top candidates have. But in Japan to this day, if you want to be an upper level executive or something, you pretty much have to have the right connection. So the civil service exam is a policy that would not work there because in theory, anyone could take the civil service exam and rise up. Now that didn't happen very often, but it could. You could have like a Robin Hood situation. That doesn't happen very often. But anyway, feudalism, the most famous part of it are the samurai warriors. And we will talk about them later. I imagine all of you have heard of samurai in some way, shape, or form. It's often misspelled, but there you go, Samurai. The samurai are powerful warriors who work for landlords. They are not roaming around doing what they want. They are bound by honor, and they follow a leader, a lord, who is their master and gives them instructions, and they work for this person. And you'll see this word in your study guide and in your textbook if you haven't done your reading yet, which I imagine many of you haven't. And this is called Bushido. Now, again, the handwriting's tough, but that is Bush, Bushido. Bushido is the Japanese honor code of the samurai. Okay? And to be an honorable samurai warrior, you follow your boss, you do what you're told. And if you lose, there is no acceptable way to say, I'll get them next time. And without getting too graphic, samurai warriors carry two swords. One is their battle sword, which they use when they fight and for any other purpose. They got to chop down a tree or something, they'd use their battle sword. And they carry a second small sword, which has one purpose. If you lose in battle, you are expected to commit seppuku or ritual suicide, where you stick it into your gut and disembowel yourself, which is a pretty tough way to go. So there is hardcore honor, and there is literally no honor in losing. You must win, and if you lose, the only acceptable answer is your own death. So the best way I can describe this is hardcore. And we will see this in parts of Japanese history for hundreds of years, because without getting too far ahead of ourselves, Japan will remain a feudal society all the way into the 1800s. Feudalism will die out in Europe in general much earlier than it does in Japan, and we'll talk about why later, but you will see samurai warriors until the middle 1800s, like actual real breathing, wearing the costumes and having the swords and stuff, samurai warriors until the middle of the 1800s. Okay, so we'll talk more about feudalism later, but many aspects of Japanese culture come from China. This is something obviously very unique to Japan and very different, but also very famous. I think all of us have at least heard of the concept of a samurai. Okay, so with that, and then there's more detail, but I don't want to, preempt your reading. So do your reading, it'll give you a little more detail, and then we can talk about it if you have questions. All right, so the last thing I want to do today is discuss one of your bullet points as a illustrative example in the study guide. 1.1 about China. The second page, there's one about technological innovations, new tech. To innovate is to create. And one of them is Champa rice. Champa is actually a kingdom that today would be Vietnam. So these are people that live in Vietnam, and they are conquered by the Chinese. And so what I want to do, and we'll actually finish a few minutes early, there is a clip on YouTube that I want to show. This guy is one of the all-stars of AP World. He makes all these great resources, and eventually I will share them with you that help you study if you want. But his name is Ben Freeman, and he has a website called Freemanpedia. which is based off the concept of Wikipedia, but it is specifically related to AP World. And so he gives lots of examples and links for all the aspects of the study guide. So you may find that helpful if you would like to look at his website. Again, Freeman, like free man, pedia, like Wikipedia, just the last 2 or 3 syllables. And he started to make videos. And I don't watch a ton of these things. I think if we do what we need to do in class and do our reading, you'll be fine. But some of you find these helpful, or let's say, God forbid, you didn't do your homework and a test is coming up and you got to catch up quickly. You might find some of these helpful. He's only made 2 so far, but his first one is on Champa rice. And so I want to play it for you. We're going to look at about 6 minutes. If you are having Wi-Fi issues and this does not play for you, if you look at your schedule that I posted the other day for period 1, the YouTube link is in that schedule. So if you get kicked out or your Wi-Fi is wonky and you can't really see it, feel free to click on the link and watch it on your own. I want you to start at the 6:15 mark, and it's about 8 minutes long. So he's going to do 2 things. He's going to explain to you in about 3 minutes what Champa rice is and why it's important. And then he's going to show you examples on old AP tests where you could use this information to answer a question. So it's actually 2 things. So number 1, what is it? And he's got some maps and cool stuff. And I can tell you the same thing, but I think he does a really good job. And I just want to show you his channel. So if you would find these videos helpful, I'm all about it. If you would like it. If you don't want to, don't worry about it. And I do this because there's a lot of review things out there on YouTube. A lot of them are crap. And so I want to show you some that I think are good and I think would be good for you to look at if you decide that's something you would like. Like Khan Academy, they mean well, but I'm not a big Khan Academy guy. And if you like Khan Academy, that's fine. Crash Course is poorly edited, and I generally do not agree with a lot of what they say. And again, history is interpretive. We might have different interpretations, and that's fine. And we don't really know the right answer sometimes. But I do like this guy's stuff, and I want to show it to you. So very briefly, we're going to open YouTube. I'm going to stop recording because it won't let me record when I'm sharing a video. So I'm going to